Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast that is here to help you to improve your English in a relaxed and natural way. And in today's episode, we have a special guest joining us for a conversation. It was my absolute pleasure to have a chat with Connor from English is Easy with Connor on YouTube. Now, I've wanted to have Connor on the podcast, to have a chat with him ever since I stumbled across his brilliant YouTube channel and we were finally able to make it happen. So firstly, thank you so much to Connor for taking the time to join me. And if you haven't done so already, which I imagine most of you already have, but please do subscribe to his channel. It is genuinely brilliant. He presents English lessons in this fantastic POV study style, and it is really helpful. So I highly recommend you do subscribe. And as you will see throughout our conversation, we talk about a wide variety of different topics, from learning and teaching English, from the YouTube kind of journey, putting things out there on YouTube and the highs and lows of that. But also, we just have a good old chat about random topics, which is one of my favorite things to do. So, you know the drill. If you are a returning viewer or listener, now's your time. Grab a cup of tea, coffee, or a drink of your choice so you can sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. But if you are new here, the first thing to do is like this video and subscribe for weekly content and podcasts to help you improve your English in a real and authentic way. So once again, thank you to Connor. Get comfy, sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation together. So Connor, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm, as I said just before this, I'm currently in my parents' dining room because the internet in my office has been shocking today. So excuse the old picture in the mirrors
I have
in the background.
similar office Wi-Fi issues. I can relate, but you've got mom's cooking, right?
You'd think so.
That's something.
Yeah, you'd think so. There better be a roast dinner at the end of this. But yeah, honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to join with me today. I love your YouTube channel. I love what you're doing and your approach. So looking forward to kind of
dissecting
that, talking about it. But yeah, so
thanks for having me, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, mate, absolute pleasure. I've really been looking forward to this. Where are you currently based?
I'm in California. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in Sonoma, California. And you're in Kent, correct?
Yeah. So when people ask me, I generally say I'm in London because because it's kind of where everybody knows. Whenever I say Kent, I have to genuinely explain.
You got to explain
where
Kent
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, about 20 minutes from the center of London by train. Very country, kind of that quintessential British kind of town.
Sounds lovely, honestly.
It is. If you're ever
you got a little countryside vibe out there.
Yeah. There's a pub down the road. Actually, it's the pub where Charles Dickens used to write a lot of his novels, funnily enough.
No way.
Yeah. I keep promising
that's amazing.
Do an episode from there, but we'll see.
I would definitely tune in for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, as I say, I've been following your YouTube channel for a while, and congratulations on the success of it. It's fully deserved.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, the approach and the style. So, I mean, it's a big question. Where did all of that begin? But yeah, where did it begin? How did it all start? Because as I say, you've got such an almost artistic approach to the way you present English. Like, yeah, where did it all start?
Yeah. So when I go about making videos, I have a very simple approach to the process, which is I'm a language learner myself. Like, I've been learning Mandarin Chinese for 10 plus years, and I speak the language. I would probably say fluently at this point. I think my listening is a lot better than my speaking. You know, me and my wife, we have an interesting communication style. She's Chinese. I'm from the US. And when we communicate, because we're both a little lazy and we both have good listening skills, I speak English and she understands, and she speaks Chinese and I understand.
Oh,
So we're
wow.
kind of always bilingually communicating. So, you know, over time, my listening has gotten even better, but I'm never using the language to speak really. So my spoken English has dropped, or spoken Chinese has dropped a bit. And anyway, my point is that as a language learner, I basically just think of what content I would want to consume and what
Mm,
content I feel is missing. And I came at it from the learning Chinese angle, the learning Chinese perspective. And, you know, you probably are not much familiar with the other languages, like learning Chinese on YouTube or
no.
learning French on YouTube or whatnot. But, you know, the learning Chinese world on YouTube is not nearly as developed as the learning English side of YouTube. And I think I just create content that I wish existed in Chinese.
Mm.
And I create content that I would want to use to study Chinese, but in English, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it completely makes sense. And I think that is why it's been so successful, because you've created content that filled the void for what you needed learning Mandarin. And I'm sure many watching this will already be well aware of your channel. But that POV style, you know, where it's almost, you feel like you're studying with yourself. You know, when you watch
Yeah.
the videos, you're kind of going through that thought process. And it does seem like there's an artistic edge there. You know, is that an aspect that you wanted to bring into it?
Yeah, definitely. You know, what I personally wish existed for me studying Chinese is like a series of deep work lessons is what I like
Mm,
to call them.
yeah.
Because, you know, there's plenty of English learning videos out there where it's like, hey, have a conversation with me.
Mm,
And the video is like 8 minutes long. And it's like, I speak, you speak, and like all the dialogue, you just like read the words on the screen or whatnot. But that always left me feeling like I was barely skimming the surface
yeah.
of sitting down and making progress with the language. And what I wanted was a very attractively and simply packaged series of videos where, you know, you sit down and everything is just like meticulously planned out, and you have a story, you have vocabulary, you have listening, you have speaking, all wrapped up in a neat package. And with the POV style, the thinking there is that if you become a channel member, on my channel, little plug there.
No, do it.
If you
Go for
become a
it.
channel member,
Yeah.
you get PDFs for all of
Uh,
my videos. So the idea is you get the actual material that I am using and that I go through in the lessons. And theoretically, you sit down with that material and you go through it with me as I go
see.
through it, but you personalize it and you kind of make it your own. So maybe there's a word that I kind of just gloss over, but it's challenging for you, it's tricky for you. You can, you know, do it your own way and personalize it and mark up your copy of the lesson as you see fit, right? And if anyone is listening and they speak Chinese and they teach Chinese and you can make something like this, please do it, because
You've
I
you've got a
really want to
guaranteed,
study Chinese this
yeah.
way.
There's a guaranteed
And
subscriber here.
yeah, you got one sub at least. And
Yeah, take it.
maybe this is a little obnoxious, but I want to say that sometimes when I study Chinese, yeah, this sounds really annoying probably, but I actually watch my own videos and I turn on auto translate to Chinese, and I use my own videos to study Chinese
Whatever works.
just
Whatever
because,
works. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the thing
So,
is as well, I always, it's like to my students, I always say, study something you're familiar with. Like if you're learning
mm,
another language, study something that you already know well, and then apply it to the language you're learning, because you're kind of, you're already taking out one of the hurdles of trying to
Mm,
understand what on earth is going on. But yeah,
that's great advice. Yeah.
studying something you already know, and you kind of don't have to battle
Absolutely. When
everything at
I
once.
remember years ago, I had a period of time I was studying Chinese through World of Warcraft,
Oh
this
yeah.
video game I was really into. I
Oh yeah.
changed the in-game settings to Chinese,
Mm,
and all these items and armor sets and weapons would pop up, and I was already familiar with the English, names of all of
mm,
these things. And so when I would see the Chinese translations of them, I wasn't just starting from scratch. Like I was working from that base point of English understanding.
yeah. So
So I think that's great advice. Yeah.
yeah. So your vocabulary of armor and swords and weapons was fantastic.
Very good, I would say. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What else do you need? What else do you need? No, that's really interesting. And as I say, I think, well, kind of what you said earlier, it's when you're trying to study a language, particularly with the amount of resources there are on YouTube now, as you say, with a lot of videos, which is Speak With Me, all fantastic. But actually, there's
Mm.
so much that sometimes you do just want somebody to take your hand and study English with you. Do you know what I mean? And just kind of just lead
Sure.
you through it gently so you can kind of just relax and not stress about it. And I think that's where your approach comes in really handy because it
I
takes the
appreciate
pressure away.
that. And
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for sitting down and spending more time, devoting more time and attention and focus to a single lesson, as
Yes.
opposed to, skipping around between 5-minute videos. Like, it seems to me that you will get more out of the lesson if you sit down and really get into the zone,
Mm.
for like 40 minutes, an hour, maybe even upwards of an hour if you're able to time wise. I think you can reach a place in deep work, to use that term again, where
Yeah.
you're really starting to get exponential gains just because you're so locked in, so focused in to what you're doing. And obviously, social media consumption can be
Oh.
so fractal and just split up, and you're spending 30 seconds here and 30 seconds there. I
Mm.
think you will obviously get a lot more out of the experience if you can just commit to
Yeah.
a 40-minute lesson as you would with a tutor.
I completely agree with you because we do live in a world now where everything is so fast paced. As you say, it's information 30 seconds, video 30 seconds. But I think if you can just take that moment just to sit down and study, as you say, 30, 40 minutes, it's almost shocking your system because
Yeah.
I know when I
Mm.
do it, my brain's like, wait, we only do 30 seconds. We only do minute kind of intake. But it's almost like
That's a
you're,
really good way to put it.
yeah,
Shocking the system with kind of stillness,
yeah,
That's I would totally agree. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, YouTube's a funny game, isn't it? It's particularly when you're trying to put out content regularly, content people enjoy, but a lot of work goes into that, doesn't it? And I
Mm.
imagine it's the same for your videos. It's not just switching on and recording a lesson. There's preparation that goes into that.
Certainly. It starts with me thinking about what's interesting to me. What do I enjoy?
Mm,
Because I as a teacher, I've been teaching for 10 years in person,
okay.
teaching real students. And one thing I've learned, it's kind of a vague lesson I've gleaned from it, but it is very true at the same time, that if a teacher is not interested in what they're
Mhm.
teaching, the students won't be interested either, right? So you have to begin from a place of genuine passion or interest in a subject or topic. And once I have that, I can, that leads into the research phase, and I, get a script together. My style of videos, this is kind of controversial, but I print out, for some reason it's controversial, I
I
print out
like
all
it.
of my lessons. Yeah, I mean, every now and then I'll get a comment where someone's like, you used a whole forest for this lesson. But I
Okay.
don't know, man. I feel like if I used 20 pages, to create this lesson, and then 500,000 people used 20 pages. Like, that's a pretty good use of 20 pages, you know? So, anyway,
No, I think that's
print out the lessons, set everything up, record the lesson, edit the lesson, get the little thumbnail edited, do the promotional stuff for it. There really is a lot that goes into it, especially if you're doing it as a one person team, as I assume you are as well.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Oh
of work.
yeah, it's all me. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And that it takes a lot of commitment. How do you, because I think the commitment it takes and the consistency that's required, I think the principles always translate to learning a language or learning anything. And I use that word consistency and I guess motivation. How do you keep motivated? I know that's quite a broad question, but just to keep putting out good content, to keep wanting to do it, how it's sometimes not easy to find that motivation.
I know. I have to give a very realistic answer.
Please do.
I don't want to BS my answer to this question. My answer is that I have one video on my channel that did really well. And I want to do that again. It was so exciting and so fun to achieve even a modicum of success there. It was a decent sized video. It wasn't like a massive video, but it was enough to get me excited about the process. And even before that, I remember, when I first started YouTube, it wasn't terribly long ago, but in the first couple of months, it was really frustrating at first. And I'm the kind of person who, I hate to say it, but I get really infatuated and excited about new projects. And then when they don't go exactly as planned, I kind of drop them, and I've had probably 5 other YouTube channels in the past that I just kind of dropped because I made 2 or 3 videos and nothing happened. And, in the beginning of English is Easy with Connor, my current channel, I would say my first 15 videos, basically no one watched them. And I remember talking with my wife about it, being really frustrated. And I have a good friend. My friend Dylan has a very interesting YouTube channel called Wu Mountain Tea, and he analyzes different Chinese teas, WU Mountain Tea.
Okay.
And he does Chinese tea imports from China into the United States, and he runs an online tea store, but he's also very knowledgeable about the YouTube world, and he's gotten millions of views kind of discussing Chinese tea on YouTube. And he was a really invaluable part of my journey to this point as well, because I remember having a talk with him in those initial first couple of weeks, and he was like, why are you even wasting time being upset about this? Like, this is the point in time where you are just going and, trying to find your flow. And there's a famous Mr. Beast YouTube quote about trying to improve one thing each time you make a new video. If you can find one thing and do it slightly better than your last video, within 100 videos, you won't need advice because you will have found your thing. You will have found your flow. And he reiterated that to me, and I kind of took that and ran with it. And very shortly after that, I had a video that was my first slightly larger video. I think it's got like 150,000 views now. But just that feeling of seeing that it's possible and that I can do it, and that all you got to do is keep plugging away at it. I mean, that's very inspiring. And, there's plenty of YouTubers who, go on for years without any kind of success. And then 3 years in, 5 years in, something clicks and they pop off. And I mean, how many amazing would have been YouTubers are there? People who just gave up before that 3-year mark or 5-year mark, whatever it was. It really is a consistency game. And if you can do that, I'm making this number up, but it seems like you're ahead of 95% of people, because it can be very frustrating, obviously, to make 50 videos and no one watches them. You're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But it could be video 51 that takes off. So it is a consistency thing for sure.
Yeah. I think you worded that perfectly. And it is that element of consistency. And I think as well, celebrating those small wins. Like for myself, I set the goal, okay, I'm going to release an episode of this podcast every Sunday. And that's the first achievement. It's just doing that every Sunday. An episode goes out 10 o'clock in the morning. That's the first achievement. And even if that happens, I thought, okay, well, I've achieved something. If it does well, okay, that's a bit of an extra achievement. But actually just by being consistent, by sticking with it, and the way you put it, just plugging away, you've already achieved something. There is an achievement there. There's no element of failure, even if a video doesn't perhaps do well. And I think that principle really translates to learning a language. It sounds, I've tried learning Spanish, but very unsuccessfully. But that idea, of just plugging away, being consistent, just keep working through it. You must have had to
I think
apply
that's
that.
you've got a really healthy outlook there. This idea of the consistency in and of itself being the primary reward, and just kind of this healthy touchstone, this habitual touchstone in your life. I think that's a really great kind of personal philosophy to have there, and I might steal that from you. I like
Do
that.
I think
That's
I
a
stole
great
it
way
from,
to.
yeah. I think I stole it from someone else. So I won't
Yeah,
take the
yeah.
credit for that. All good things come from
No,
someone
no.
else. Did you apply that? Because of
You.
course, learning Mandarin, that's
Mm.
another kettle of fish from English to. How did you go about? Of course, okay, your listening skills better than your speaking skills. I think that applies to every language we learn. But
Mm.
of course, I mean, I
Sure.
know that's been a long journey for you, but that must have, again, you must have just had to plug away, just kept going with that to get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very slow and frustrating road. I gotta say, Chinese is a very difficult language. Just as English is a tricky language for Chinese people learning it, I mean, Chinese is equally frustrating
Mm,
for Westerners learning it. And just the hurdle of the characters and getting familiar with the characters in the very beginning is like this insurmountable
mm,
task. Like, it's so frustrating. And um but the cool thing is you do get this exponential growth with it. Like, after you're familiar with all the most common characters, and you start seeing the different variations of how they're used and whatnot, it does get easier. My goal with learning Chinese was always to get to a point where I could read young adult novels in Chinese,
mm,
because I thought, this idea of comprehensible input, right? If I can get to the point where I can just turn studying into entertainment and read books that I would be reading anyway, then I've made it, because I can
yeah,
just do that for fun, and studying ceases to be studying. It's
mm,
just enjoyment. And I would say, I would say I'm there now. I read like the Harry Potter series in
right.
Chinese. I read, let's see, what else did I read? I read some Chinese novels like Yu Hua. Yu Hua is a very famous Chinese novelist. I can't read. Here's an interesting little side note here. I cannot read Chinese books written by Chinese authors. I have to read
Oh,
translations of English books, because just the sentence structure and the use of language is so much clearer to me when English is translated into Chinese, as opposed to just reading source Chinese,
mm,
that it's just night and day. But anyway, this guy Yu Hua, he writes in a very minimalist style. Um, I don't know if you've ever read like Hemingway, or like
mm,
Raymond Carver is a
mm,
big one. um, J.D. Salinger, these Western authors who have kind of this sparse prose style, this minimalist style, that the language is very simple, but the meaning behind the language is like really
mm,
meaningful and really, really full, right? So, I was reading Yu Hua novels, but basically all I'm saying is I really believe in just reading and massive amounts of comprehensible input, right?
Yeah.
Just really take in as much of the language as you can. And the way I study it is I have an app on my phone where I have an ebook, and then there's an audio file that goes with the ebook. So I'm listening to someone
Mm.
read me a story, and I'm watching the words go by as well. And I'm highlighting difficult words for later. And that over the course of months and years, I mean, you can't help but reach fluency. It's pretty
Yeah.
simple. Yeah.
So when you're listening to those ebooks, you're kind of actively listening. You know, you're studying, you're going
Try
through
to
it with,
be. Yeah.
yeah, with the aim of drawing something out of it. Because I think, like for example, passive listening is fantastic. You know, you're going about your daily life, you
Mhm.
have something in, just feeding whatever language you're learning into your
Sure.
brain. But I do agree with that aspect that there has to be an element of active learning or studying, you know, where you are going through the process with the idea of learning something new, you know.
Absolutely. Um, you know, it comes down to this idea, at least for me. I don't have a great memory, which
No,
is
I don't.
ironically why I started learning Chinese. I was so frustrated with my memory when I was in college. I felt like I would go to class and not retain anything,
Mm,
that I started learning Chinese as a challenge to myself because I knew that every word is a unique picture, right? So if you can remember 2,000 unique pictures, then there's nothing wrong with your memory. This idea of like, if you're going to remember something, there needs to be a reason.
ah,
Like,
yeah.
why would you ever remember something that doesn't mean anything to you?
Mm,
It's not relevant to your life. It's not applicable. And I actually made an entire video on this on my channel about remembering vocabulary by drawing personal connections to your life, basically. But that's part of active listening, right? Is
yeah.
you encounter a new word, and you pause the study session for a moment and you think, what does this mean to me? Like, how can I relate
Exactly.
this to my life? um, can I relate this to me moving apartments this week? Can I relate this to someone I know, like a dream I have for the future? And if
Mm,
you can successfully do that and kind of shed different angles of light onto a word or a term you're trying to remember and understand it from different angles that are relevant to your life and who you are, you're going to remember it so much more easily because it matters to you, you know?
it's so true. Context.
Yeah.
You've got to give them personal
Context.
context. For example, it's one thing that's us through YouTube or whatever, or a teacher presenting a word, the definition and the sentence. Fantastic. It gives you an
Hmm.
example, but that's the point really where you want to pause, stop, and apply. You know, okay,
Absolutely.
what sense? How can I apply this to my life, to where I am? Because otherwise, you know, you're trying to, yeah, you're trying to apply it to someone else's life or what they've come up with, and you're much less likely to remember it.
It's too abstract if you don't, right?
Yeah,
It's like, what even is this? You need to understand things within the context of your experience and your life, basically. Yeah. So I mean, I really believe in that. And I could probably be a little better with active listening, active study. I
yeah.
think, I get in a cab or I get on the subway and I kind of throw on a book. And these days, I'm probably doing a bit too much passive
Mm,
learning. That's maybe a goal I'll have for this coming year, is to really get back into it. But I think that is so important. Just relating things back to yourself, to your
yeah.
life. Like, what does this word mean to you? Like, how
Mm,
can you use this word? I just think we have a special connection, a special relationship with each and every word, right?
yes,
Like, my relationship with the word school is very different than your relationship with
exactly.
it. It means something different to me based on my experiences growing up and your different experiences. And I think that's worth taking note of, that means something and you can develop that relationship, right?
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. And then I think, you know, I try and say to people all the time, it does take more time doing that. You know, taking that time just to
It
stop and
does.
think, okay, you're not turning as many pages, so to speak, but you're building just this solid foundation from a singular word, and it's much, much more likely to stay with you. And I like the point you said as well about school, because I actually really struggled at school. I wasn't good at retaining information. I was diabolical at taking exams. And I kind of,
Diabolical.
I honestly, I don't know what I would go in there, and then my brain would just freeze, no matter how
Yeah.
much I kind of studied or whatever. I've always been terrible at that kind of thing. And
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I kind of, I never thought I would even have an interest in languages, or that was something that would be my career, so to speak. But
Mm,
it's actually one thing it kind of taught me is that language, okay, it does help if you have natural abilities, but actually learning a language, or I guess learning anything, is not dependent on perhaps your abilities to retain information or your abilities to do well at school. It's just about that wanting it. That, again, I guess I'm going to say it again, consistency.
totally.
Yeah.
When I was in school, I was learning Spanish in middle
Mm.
school, and I was taking Spanish classes for 5 years. I literally cannot speak a sentence of Spanish after 5 years
Yeah.
of the language. I could maybe say a couple real basic words that anyone else living in the States knows. But it's so interesting to me that the only difference between complete and utter failure learning Spanish and fluency in Chinese, which is arguably way more difficult, is just interest. In
Yes.
Chinese, there's this very famous expression, 兴趣是最好的老师, which basically just means the best teacher is interest, right? And if
Okay.
you're going to
Wow.
learn something, it's because you're interested. Like when I work with kids who are 9 years old, 10 years old. The kids with the most developed vocabularies, the best English, who sound the most fluent and the most native, however you want to say it, it's because they're obsessed with something in English. Like they're obsessed with
Yes.
Harry Potter, or they play Minecraft and they watch a bunch of Minecraft YouTubers and they know all this internet slang because of that. The kids who fall behind haven't latched onto something that interests them. And
So
that's
true.
always what I'm telling parents, right? Is like, pay attention to what your kid is interested in. If they love Hello Kitty, then, like
Go
buy
with it.
them Hello Kitty books. That's probably a bad
Yeah.
example. I don't know if there's, buy
No.
them some kind of series that they're into. In
Yeah.
Chinese, find the English version of that, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I've never really thought of that, but it's finding your interest in the language. Maybe perhaps just, I mean, some people just have a natural interest in the language itself, which is fantastic. I would say the majority of people are learning it either because they have to, they need to, or for whatever reason. But yeah, find your thing you're interested in, whether it's cars, cooking, I don't know. And then
Absolutely.
base your learning around that. You've got to want to do it. You've got to be interested.
And, from my perspective, learning characters comes more naturally that way. I'll give you an example. There's 3 characters I've learned recently, and I know these characters very well. I can recognize them anywhere. I can write them. I can type them. The characters are Gan Dao Fu, Gan Dao Fu, right? And that's the Chinese translation of Gandalf from
Oh,
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Right? So why do I know those characters? Why can I write them? Why can I use them in conversation? Because I like Lord of the Rings and
Brilliant.
I'm interested in it. And I was reading those books in Chinese and that's clicked with me, right? And if I had seen those 3 characters somewhere else in some different context, it probably wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have cared, right?
So true. You've created that connection with it on a personal level.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
The fact, yeah, it's really interesting. And I fundamentally agree with that. And I think that's often why generally speaking, we don't retain languages we learn at school, because we're learning it in such a generic basis. We're learning it as in such in kind of study terms. That's why we often don't remember. Like I learned German at school. I say learn. I went to the classes for German at school. Can say hello. That's about it. But it's because we don't have that interest with it. We don't have that connection, that it's not going to happen.
Well, isn't it interesting that we both have independently kind of realized this lesson about language learning, and we both think it's essential, but it really is so little talked about. Like, how many
Yeah.
YouTube videos are there discussing this? I feel like it is so skipped over and so overlooked in the language learning world. I mean, in 10 years of teaching in China, never once did I hear anything like this. It was just
Yeah.
always rote memorization. Oh,
Mm.
do your homework. Make sure you do your homework every day and you'll learn the language.
Yeah,
Like, no,
exactly.
kids space out doing their homework every day. They
Oh, yeah.
don't care. They resent it. You know, they mentally distance themselves from the process of learning because it's so unappealing to them, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
in the long run, it actually takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure
sure.
off. Okay, as we said before, great to sit down and study, but yeah, when you're doing something you love, it's not arduous, is it? It's not
Mm,
and you just got to find the thing you love within English. Yeah.
mm.
Really interesting. I completely agree with your insights. But of course, you're an extremely busy guy, extremely busy just with YouTube, with work, with family. How do you kind of balance all of that? Do you take time is there anything you do just to kind of take your mind away from YouTube, away from education? Because sometimes if you're anything like me, it's
Yeah.
overwhelming. I'm constantly thinking of ideas, constantly thinking of this, blah, 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 blah. But you got to have that thing that just takes you away from it every now and then. Do you find that for yourself?
Well, let me flip the question back around on you
Mm,
because you've been doing this longer than I have, and you've had some serious success with it on YouTube and on Instagram. And I want to ask you this question because I'm newer to it than you are, and I'm bad at that.
yeah,
I get really sucked into it. I get kind of obsessed with it, and obsession can be good in some ways.
yeah.
You know, you just are pouring yourself into a project, but at the same time, it's tough for me to draw that line
Mm.
between work and relaxation. I mean, do you have any advice
Well,
in that
it's really
category?
it's really funny when questions are thrown back on me. I always think, this is what it's like when I throw random questions at people and just
Little
wait for
taste of
answers.
your own medicine
Yeah,
there.
I've got the easy job normally. Um, yeah, do you know what? It's a really mentally challenging game being in this. And the biggest lesson I learned is you have to be competitive, but with yourself. And what I mean by that is I went for ages where my success or my whatever I kind of felt was an accomplishment was only based on what everybody else was doing. How do my figures compare? How does my engagement compare to others? How does it blah blah blah? And that actually creates quite a negative way of approaching it. But then once I started to think, you
Yeah,
know what, I got to stop this. I got to stop comparing myself or not competing with others in the sense of wanting to do better, but just analyzing my success by what everyone else was doing or getting. And once I started to think of it more just on my own terms, how I kind of what I was proud of, also what I feel that I could have done better, just creating that competition within myself is what helped me to just kind of mentally compartmentalize success or what I view as
sure.
an achievement. For an example, if I put a video out now and okay, let's imagine it doesn't get a lot of views, but I get some comments that say, "Oh, Gid, I really enjoyed this one. Thanks, mate." Or I had someone message me the other day and they say, "But just to let you know, I'm actually quite fluent in English, but in a after a stressful day, your video just helped me to chill."
That's a cool one.
Well, how much more
That's
of
a
an
nice comment.
accomplishment is that than comparing my
Yeah.
views to someone else who's got
Oh, for sure.
that? And I think sometimes we take the human element out of it and it just becomes numbers and figures, where actually you think what we're, particularly in the realm that we're in, what we're able to do, help somebody reach their goals, help somebody learn a language that can potentially change lives.
Mm,
If that's 1,000 views, that's 1,000 people you've reached, and that's an accomplishment. That's an achievement.
absolutely.
Um,
Totally agree with that. And I would never look down on any other category of YouTuber. This
mm,
is not what I mean by this, but you know, if you kind of compare the content we're producing to like, I don't know, Sniper Wolf reaction videos, like reacting to funny
Yeah.
TikToks or something. Like, yeah, there's a place for that too, and I'm not diminishing that, but all I'm saying is that there is a certain reward that comes along with providing a genuine, helpful service to
Yeah.
people that they can use. Like the videos we're creating are tools that people can use to better their lives and make real, tangible, measurable improvements in their lives, you know? And I think that really feels good to just be taking on a project that's meaningful in
Yeah.
that way. And if you get one of those comments, a couple of those comments, like that's an amazing feeling to know that
Yeah.
you actually made a difference in somebody's life, you know?
Exactly. And we do live in a society which is just obsessed with numbers, figures. That's kind of
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
rating of success. And okay, that might be it. But I like, for example, when you're on YouTube, you can have the YouTube Studio app. I don't have
Mm.
any of it on my phone anymore. So I
Me
can't check any.
either. I do that too. It's
Yeah,
too much, man.
yeah. Otherwise, I'm just constant. And I think, what are you doing, Gid? Like you're just checking
It's
it
not
every half an
productive.
hour to see how many views you got. How it's going to do
I
what it's going to
know.
do. You can't change it. It is what it is.
I
Um,
know.
so for me, like for example, I don't know. Rather than do that,
Wait,
I
you
go.
don't know the YouTube secret, Gid? That
I
YouTube
don't.
gets you more views the more you check the app? You don't know this?
Apparently that works. Yeah, I need to put that into practice. Yeah, I should check it more every 5 minutes. But I don't know whether you
Yeah.
found the same, but it's a
Mm.
little bit of a downward spiral that I think you have to be careful of
Oh, yeah.
because it's just
Yeah,
obsessive.
and everybody learns this in their own way. You know, you gotta, it's part of the YouTube journey. You know, I'm
Yeah,
sure that every successful creator out there has had some period of time where they were getting a little too sucked into it, a little too addicted
yeah.
to the numbers game. I remember watching a PewDiePie
Oh
video where
wow,
he
yeah.
was talking about this, you know, a guy who's got 100+ million
Mm.
subscribers. And just imagine the temptation of wanting to check YouTube Studio if you've got
Oh,
a
could you
hundred
imagine?
million people.
Yeah.
Like how do you even balance your life if you have on your phone just a click away 100 million people
Mm.
you can communicate with? Like it's crazy, right? So everybody gets there in their own way. Luckily, in my life, I've got a great girl. I've got a really great wife who grounds me
Yes.
and stabilizes me. She is way more like level headed than me,
Mm.
and she's not as obsessive about projects and stuff. And, you know, there's merits to each
Yeah.
personality type for sure, but we really complement each other well. And
It's lovely.
she does a good job of reminding me when it's time to take a step back and relax. And does it really matter in the big
Mm.
picture? So I think having a partner who knows what you need, if
Mm.
you're lucky enough to have that, it sounds like you have that as
I
well,
do.
which
Yeah.
is a great thing, is a really wonderful blessing to have in your life. Yeah.
That's a lovely comment, mate. I think we're very similar actually. I've got the same kind of inclinations where you just want to succeed at what you do. You want to succeed, and then
Mm,
that can become obsessive. But yeah, my wife's exactly the same. And it kind of at the end of the day, even if you're learning English or learning anything, the reality of life is it will happen if you're consistent. It doesn't always happen at the times we want.
sure.
It doesn't always, but family, roof over your head. There's always something to just kind of focus on more so. And then you just keep going. I like what you said, you just keep plugging away. But as regards taking mind off it, my thing is a few of the
Mm.
subscribers will know this. I'm a drummer. I love to play drums.
Oh,
And I
nice.
find for me, like that is just my brain doesn't process anything other than just playing music. And having that something which is completely opposite, completely not attached to anything else I do, really helps me to come back refocused.
Mm,
I don't know if you have any.
absolutely.
Do you have
Yeah.
anything like that, which just kind of separates it?
Oh man. Yeah. Writing can sometimes do that for me. I haven't been
Mm.
writing much since I've been focusing on YouTube. I write kids' books, but
Uh,
there's these multi-year gaps between books. And I kind of started YouTube from a certain sense, in a certain sense, just to fill the spaces between publishing books. And but writing can do that for me.
Wow.
I'm really into meditation,
Right.
and
Okay.
there's a park across the street where I'll try to go over there a couple times a week. And especially after spending hours recording or editing or getting really buried in YouTube stuff, I'll take a walk over there and I will do a meditation walk. I know it sounds really annoying. It sounds really woo woo, but like I'll take a meditation walk and I will just focus on the sensation of my feet coming into contact with the ground and walk in a circle for 30 minutes and just pay attention. There's a really great book called The Power of Now. It sounds really annoying.
No,
it sounds like the most annoying variety of self-help, but it really, really changed my life. And it's just about living in the present moment and this concept of you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts, and drawing a distinction between what you're thinking and who you are, right? And I feel like before, a couple of years ago, this is getting pretty philosophical now, but a couple of years ago, when I wasn't really paying attention to these things, I would get so swept up in my thoughts and I would just get lost for hours in like plans for the future or thinking about things I'd done in the past. And reading this book was really, it just lit up a light bulb for me. This idea of making an effort to open up the hood of your brain and just take a look at what's under the hood. Just take a look at what kind of thoughts you're having, when you have them, why you have them. See them and then let them go. And if you make a habit of doing this, if you take 30 minutes and just sit and look at your brain and what it's doing, over time, you realize patterns and you realize some things you hadn't realized before. And I think that has also helped a lot with, like I said earlier, having a bit of obsessiveness about projects can be an advantage, can work in your favor, right? And I think that's why I've had a little bit of success on YouTube, just because I've really, really gone for it. So it can be a good thing, but it's also something that needs to be checked, and you can get swept up in it so easily. So reading this book and practicing mindfulness, I would say, has probably been the biggest thing that helps me, and just keeping expectations at literally zero,
Yeah. Just roll with it. Just roll with it, and just see. And I
just go with it.
I think we can be very insular creatures, particularly with our thoughts, and they can be our own worst enemies sometimes. But you're right. Don't get overwhelmed by them. Just sometimes see why they're there, where they're coming from, what they're
what's
stemming
crazy
from.
too? What's so insane that I forget who said this exactly, but I was watching a video where someone was kind of talking about mindfulness stuff, and they said a quote that was just, most thoughts are junk.
It's so true. That is true.
And it's so true.
Particularly in my mind.
If no, for me, it's like 99% of the stuff that goes on up here is so useless and just random junk floating around in your head that's not really worth, paying a lot of attention to or giving credence to. It's just like,
it's so
just
true.
Noise, really. Yeah.
It's like the things we worry about. I know the things I worry about or get anxious about, 99% of them never happen, but you fabricate these kind of ideas in your mind, and it's our nature, isn't it? But it's
like, how many thoughts do you have on a daily basis that are like groundbreaking, worth paying attention to, life-changing insights? Like, for me, not a lot, right?
I'd say it's got to be on like a yearly basis. I have a couple.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I have a couple every now and then.
Something about the way this was phrased, most thoughts are junk, just made me laugh and made me realize, like, actually, I think a lot of junk is going on up here, and it's easy to get swept up in a tidal wave of junk thoughts, but just recognizing it, letting it go, is very helpful for me.
Yeah, and I think as well, like that again, it applies to, because the biggest thing with people have with English, I've realized, is their biggest obstacle is their own thoughts, their own mind, their own
Mm,
whatever challenges they
sure.
kind of present. But actually, I think sometimes just stop thinking and just go with it. Whether that's a
Yeah.
conversation, whether that's wanting to learn, stop thinking so much and just naturally roll with it, and just
I think
take the
the
thought
fear of making
process away from
mistakes
it.
is a big part of that too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The fear of messing up, the fear of saying something wrong is something that holds people back.
Mm,
And, you know, a little personal anecdote. I used to really struggle with public speaking, and I had a
right.
lot of social anxiety that has gotten better over the years. But I remember a real breakthrough with this anxiety was I made a friend, this guy, Jack, who had this really kind of abrasive way of like communicating with
Mm.
people where it was like a Rick and Morty episode
All right.
years
Okay.
before Rick and Morty, where he was just kind of like stammering and stumbling all over himself and like repeating himself. It was like when he would talk to you, it was just a mess, but he was so confident at the same
Mm,
time because if he made a mistake in the process of speaking, there was 50 other mistakes. Like it doesn't matter. He would just kind of barrel through conversations. And he was also a charming guy and it worked for him. But I remember just being really inspired by that. And I think you could apply that to language learning
yeah.
as well. It's so many people could progress so much more with their spoken abilities if they weren't so afraid, so anxious about making mistakes.
Mm,
When in reality, it can be an endearing thing to make
yeah.
mistakes, right? It really humanizes people.
Yeah. It's actually a comforting factor. It's
Sure.
yeah. And I always kind of I kind of go with the idea that we're all individual. We've all got our own personalities. We all present things in our own ways. We have our own way of communicating, speaking, and try and let that come out. Don't kind of suppress your personality, particularly when speaking in another language. I think that's often quite a difficult thing to do, but let your
Mm,
personality come out. Let who you are
sure.
come out. Okay, it might not be perfect. We're all rough around the edges. That's okay. If you do that, you're much more likely to just go for it and get
Yeah,
speaking.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Find your voice, find the words and the communication style that resonates with you, your style of talking, your way of doing things.
Mm.
And also, like, nobody wants to talk to a computer. Nobody
No.
wants to talk to an AI chatbot all day.
Mm.
It's like, why are we doing this in the first place? Why are we learning languages?
Yeah.
It's the end goal is genuine human connection in a
That's it.
lot of cases, right? Of course, there's work and there's, education, whatnot. But at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it comes down to just making a real connection with somebody. And that involves a kind of sloppy and imperfect process, right?
Yeah. And I love that point. Let's go back to the original goal why 99.9% of us are doing this: communication, to connect with other humans. And I think once you sometimes just kind of revert back to the goal, it's all about communication. And I think sometimes we obsess about IELTS, degrees, blah, 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 blah. But
Yeah, yeah,
take it
yeah.
back to that original goal, about communication. Connor, I could talk to you for ages, mate. Time has absolutely flown. Um,
Where are
yeah,
we at?
I don't even know
Think it's
where
flying,
we are.
huh?
I don't even know. I don't know when we started. I don't know what day it is. I don't know. I don't know what's going on anymore. But yeah, fascinating insights. It really got me thinking on quite a few things as well.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
you've got a lot of great insights as well.
yeah, yeah. So
I think we're very
sometimes,
similar people in a lot of ways.
yeah, and I think as well, yeah, we're all in this game together, and particularly with learning English
Mm,
or YouTube, whatever it is. And I think if you can just kind of create that community, we're just helping each other out and just trying to. And I always say this
mm,
with people that are learning English, commend someone now and then. Or if you, I don't know, you commend somebody's English, or you got a mate that's learning English and they say something. I think we kind of hold back too much from commendation, or we hold back too much just from saying, "Oh, well done," keep going. You got this. Because we all need to hear it now and then, don't we? Just a pat on the back.
Absolutely. I totally believe in that. And there's also a weird social element to that in China, because as a white guy learning Chinese, you say your name and you get just a tidal wave of compliments. Oh, your Chinese is so amazing. Your Chinese is so good. It's not good, right? But, a Chinese person works their whole life to, work their English skills up to a proficient level. And then it's like, a lot of the time it feels like no one notices. And I do think it's important. I feel like there's this weird cultural imbalance there, at least in the China sphere, the Asia sphere, right? But I totally agree with you. And I think it's important to just, take a breather sometimes, take a step back and just say, hey, you're doing a great job. Like, you are enough and you are great as is. You're doing a great job,
Yeah. I think that's a great message to end on. And I think no matter where you are with your English, wherever you are, if you're listening or watching this, I think we're both kind of sending the same message that, you're doing well. Even if you feel at the moment you've hit a wall or you're just not progressing, just chill, just relax, keep going. You're doing all right. We're doing all right.
I had a grade school teacher growing up who would do this thing where she would say, all right, everybody, take your hand and give yourself a pat on the back. And I've incorporated that into my videos. Every video, I'll take a moment towards the end of the lesson, be like, all right, if you've made it this far, take your hand.
Yeah.
Give yourself a pat on the back. So if you've made it this far in the podcast, guys, if you are, still listening, take your hand, give yourself a pat on the back.
Too true. Mate,
it's important to do.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Connor. And maybe if you're up for it, we'll do this again sometime. That would be my pleasure.
Would love to, Gideon. Appreciate it.
Mate. Cheers.